Hi there. Have you ever walked into a grand dining room, chandeliers glowing, tables set with crystal and silver, only to realize there was no seat for you? And that was just the beginning of my mother-in-law's public cruelty. My name is Sarah Miller. At my mother-in-law's Thanksgiving dinner, I stood frozen as every guest took their place while I was left standing. The humiliation burned into me like fire. That was the moment I understood. Silence would cost me more than speaking up. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. My story begins long before that infamous Thanksgiving. I grew up in a loving working-class family in Cleveland, Ohio. My parents worked tirelessly to give me opportunities they never had. My father was a factory supervisor at a steel plant for 30 years, and my mother was a nurse at the local hospital. They sacrificed everything to send me to college, making me the first in the family to earn a degree. I worked while studying, took out loans, and eventually earned a master's degree in occupational therapy. When I met Ryan, I had a successful practice helping stroke patients and accident victims regain their independence. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, built through hard work and determination. I met Ryan 3 years ago at a college reunion. He was my roommate's older brother, and I was catching up with old friends. Our eyes met across the hotel ballroom, in that way you think only happens in movies. He looked handsome in his navy suit, with kind eyes and an easy laugh. We talked until the event staff began clearing tables. Ryan was a corporate lawyer from an established Dallas family. His father, Charles, owned a successful law firm that had been in the family for 3 generations, and his mother, Patricia, came from old Dallas society families. Ryan had attended prep schools, Yale and Harvard Law, and moved in circles I only read about in magazines. Despite our different backgrounds, we connected on a deeper level. He was brilliant, driven, yet grounded, and made me laugh until my sides hurt. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 8 months, he proposed to me during a weekend in Napa Valley. I accepted without hesitation, believing we could bridge any gap between our 2 worlds. That was my first mistake. I had underestimated the depth of social class divisions, especially for someone like Patricia. I first met Ryan's parents at our engagement party at their country club. Charles was cordial but somewhat reserved, a distinguished man with silver hair who seemed more comfortable discussing legal precedents than personal matters. But Patricia was an entirely different story. She was impeccably dressed in what I later learned were custom designer pieces, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone born into privilege. Her smile never reached her eyes when she looked at me. Throughout that first evening, Patricia constantly asked questions that felt like a deposition. Where exactly in Cleveland? What kind of nursing did your mother do? Which state school did you attend? Each of my answers seemed to register as disappointment, though she maintained her society smile. She even mentioned Ryan's ex-girlfriend Amanda several times, talking about her family's ranch in Montana and her father's position as a federal judge. Amanda and Ryan looked so perfect together at the cattle baron's ball, she reminisced, showing me a photo on her phone. Her mother and I chair the hospital auxiliary together. Such a pity they grew apart. Ryan seemed oblivious to these subtle attacks. He adored his mother and couldn't see through her polished facade. Whenever I gently mentioned her behavior later, he would defend her motives. Mom is just being protective, he would say. She wants what's best for me. Give her time, she'll see how wonderful you are. Time, unfortunately, only seemed to make things worse. Ryan's sister Jennifer initially appeared welcoming, complimenting my dress or asking about my work, but there was an underlying competitiveness in her interactions, constantly mentioning her own achievements or subtly correcting my etiquette at family events. Ryan's brother Thomas and his wife Carolyn maintained a polite distance. They were courteous but never warm, following Patricia's lead in keeping me at arm's length. I later learned that Caroline had endured similar treatment when she first joined the family, but eventually won acceptance by joining the firm and fully embracing their lifestyle. I tried everything to win Patricia's approval. I brought thoughtful gifts to family gatherings, researched causes she supported, and volunteered for her charity committees. Every effort was dismissed or ignored. The antique silver picture frame I gave her for Christmas somehow never appeared on any shelf. My offer to help organize the annual hospital fundraiser was declined because we have our regular volunteers. The only relative who showed me genuine warmth was Aunt Rose, my father's sister, who lived in Fort Worth near Ryan's family. Rose was my lifeline, providing objective perspective and support when I felt like I was drowning in Patricia's subtle hostility. Unlike my parents, who still lived in Cleveland, Rose could attend family events and witness the dynamics firsthand. When the invitation came to Patricia's elaborate Thanksgiving dinner, celebrating the law firm's 75th anniversary, I approached it with both hope and dread. The formal invitation specified cocktail attire and mentioned a catered dinner by Dallas's most exclusive restaurant. Rose was also invited, which surprised me but brought some comfort. I later learned that Charles and Rose had been friends since law school, something Patricia tolerated but never embraced. "This is a significant evening," Ryan told me as we prepared for the event. "Dad is announcing his succession plan, and Mom has been planning this for months. Everyone will be there, including all the firm's partners and their families." I nodded, choosing a sophisticated burgundy dress I hoped would meet Patricia's exacting standards. I knew I would do everything possible to make a good impression. If only I had known how that night would unfold and how it would change everything. The evening of the anniversary Thanksgiving arrived with crisp November air. Ryan and I drove his BMW to his parents' mansion in Highland Park, joining a procession of luxury cars in the circular drive. The house was illuminated like something from Southern Living magazine, with professional lighting highlighting the manicured grounds and Georgian architecture. "You look stunning," Ryan said, taking my hand before we approached the grand entrance. I had spent hours preparing, wearing the burgundy dress I had saved for months to buy, with professionally done hair and carefully applied makeup, to look elegant but not overdone. Patricia personally greeted us at the door, embracing Ryan warmly and gushing about how distinguished he looked in his dark suit. When she turned to me, her smile became noticeably cooler. She offered a brief air kiss that didn't quite connect. "Sarah, you're here," she said, as if my attendance was questionable. She made no comment about my appearance before turning to greet arriving partners. The grand foyer opened to several beautifully appointed rooms, filled with about 40 people in cocktail attire. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light throughout the space, and uniformed servers moved gracefully with champagne and appetizers. A pianist played softly in the corner of the main salon. I recognized many faces from previous gatherings: Charles's law school classmates, Ryan's cousins from Houston, senior partners from the firm, Patricia's sister Margaret holding court near the fireplace, regaling a captive audience with stories from her recent European tour. As Ryan led me through the rooms, stopping to speak with colleagues and relatives, I noticed family portraits lining the hallways. There were formal family photos spanning generations, candid shots from exotic vacations, and several photos of Charles and Patricia at legal and charity events. I searched but couldn't find any photos from our wedding, though there were recent photos of both Thomas and Jennifer, with their spouses prominently displayed. "Ryan, come meet Judge Harrison," Charles called from across the room. Ryan squeezed my hand apologetically before joining his father and several distinguished-looking men I recognized as appellate judges. Left alone, I moved toward the dining room, admiring the elaborate table setting visible through the French doors. The mahogany table was set for 23 people with Waterford crystal, Wedgwood china, and sterling silver arranged with museum-quality precision. Calligraphed place cards marked each seat. "Quite an impressive setup, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to see Aunt Rose, elegant in a navy cocktail dress, her gray hair styled in her signature chignon. "Rose," I hugged her, genuinely relieved to see a friendly face. "I didn't expect to see you here. Charles and I go back to our law school days at UT," she said with a knowing smile. "Patricia tolerates our friendship because Charles insists on it. He made sure I was included tonight." As we chatted, a server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. He offered one to Rose, but passed by me without stopping. I had to step forward and ask, "Excuse me, might I have one as well?" The server looked momentarily flustered, then nodded and allowed me to take a glass. I noticed Patricia observing the interaction from across the room, her expression tightening. "Don't let her intimidate you," Rose whispered, following my gaze. "That's exactly what she's hoping for." Throughout the cocktail hour, I noticed similar small slights. Servers consistently overlooked me when offering hors d'oeuvres. When Jennifer showed off her new diamond tennis bracelet, an anniversary gift from her husband, Patricia commented that it was exactly the kind of investment jewelry that reflected proper values and taste, while glancing pointedly at my modest wedding set. The most obvious snub came when Patricia personally circulated with a bottle of vintage wine. She filled everyone's glass, engaging in brief conversations with each guest. When she reached Rose and me, she filled Rose's glass while asking about her recent cruise, then, without acknowledging me at all, turned away. As she did, her elbow deliberately knocked against my arm, causing wine to splash across my burgundy dress. "Oh my," she said without genuine concern. "You should visit the powder room to address that." In the guest bathroom, I dabbed at the stain with a damp towel, fighting back tears of frustration. Through the air vent, I could hear voices from the adjacent study. "She's trying so desperately to fit in. It's almost painful," Patricia's voice carried clearly. "That dress is obviously department store, and those shoes." "Mother, please be charitable," Jennifer's voice replied, though she was clearly amused. "Ryan seems happy enough. For now," Patricia said. "Amanda called last week, you know. She's moved back to Dallas after her divorce. I've always believed they were meant to find their way back to each other." I stood frozen, the damp towel pressed against my dress. Ryan had dated Amanda for 2 years before meeting me. They had broken up because, according to Ryan, they had different life goals. I had no idea they were still in contact, much less that Patricia was actively facilitating reconnection. When I returned to the party, Ryan was deep in discussion with his father about the firm's expansion plans. He barely noticed my return, just nodding absently when I rejoined him. The strain of maintaining composure while feeling increasingly unwelcome was becoming overwhelming. Finally, Patricia announced that dinner would be served. Guests began moving toward the dining room, looking for their assigned seats. I checked each beautifully scripted place card, but couldn't find my name anywhere around the table. "Ryan," I whispered, "I don't see my place card." He looked surprised, then shrugged. "Must be an oversight. Sit here, between me and Rose." He casually pulled over an additional chair, disrupting the precise spacing. The chair he added had no place setting, no crystal stemware, no elaborate silverware that graced every other seat. Patricia noticed immediately. "Ryan, we planned the seating very carefully," she said, her voice strained. "It's fine, Mother. Sarah can sit here." As everyone settled, I felt Patricia's disapproving glances whenever I spoke. When I responded to Charles's polite question about my practice with a story about helping a veteran regain mobility after an IED injury, Patricia interrupted to ask Caroline about their children's private school applications, effectively silencing me. The tension was mounting, but I had no idea how much worse things would become. The dining room sparkled under the Georgian crystal chandelier. Waterford glasses gleamed against the mahogany, each place setting featuring silverware that looked like family heirlooms. Arrangements of autumn flowers and miniature pumpkins created an elegant seasonal centerpiece. Once everyone was seated, servers emerged from the kitchen with military precision. The head server announced the first course: butternut squash soup with sage cream. Fine china bowls were placed before each guest. Every guest except me. I sat awkwardly as everyone around me received their soup. Ryan was absorbed in conversation with Thomas about recent Supreme Court decisions and didn't notice immediately. However, Rose did. "Excuse me," she said to a passing server. "My niece didn't receive the soup course." The server looked uncomfortable and glanced toward Patricia, who smiled serenely from the head of the table. "I'm afraid we prepared exactly the right number of portions," Patricia said. "The caterers were given a precise count. Perhaps you could share with Ryan, Sarah." The implication was unmistakable. I hadn't been counted because I wasn't really family. Ryan finally noticed and frowned. "Mother, surely the kitchen can prepare one more bowl. This soup requires specific timing, dear. It can't simply be whipped up. I'm sure Sarah understands." Her tone suggested that making a scene would be terribly inappropriate. Ryan hesitated, then slid his bowl toward me. "We'll share," he said quietly before returning to his legal discussion. I took a small spoonful, my appetite fading with each moment. Around the table, conversation flowed about recent court cases, upcoming elections, and Jennifer's appointment to the museum board. I remained silent, feeling increasingly invisible. When the second course arrived, pan-seared scallops with lemon risotto, the pattern repeated. Everyone received a portion except me. This time I didn't mention it, and neither did Ryan. He absently offered me one of his scallops while debating legal ethics with a senior partner. By the third course, cranberry sorbet, I noticed several guests glancing at me with discomfort as I sat with an empty place before me. Charles looked puzzled but said nothing, deferring to Patricia's management of the evening. Then came the main course. Servers appeared carrying silver platters of perfectly carved turkey, honey-glazed ham, traditional stuffing, green bean casserole, and sweet potato soufflé. The aromas filled the room, and appreciative comments rippled around the table. A server placed filled plates before each guest until he reached me. Instead of the traditional Thanksgiving feast everyone else received, he set down a small side salad with vinaigrette. The contrast between my meager plate and the abundant holiday meals surrounding me couldn't have been starker. Rose set down her fork with a sharp clink. "Patricia, why does Sarah have salad while everyone else has Thanksgiving dinner?" The table fell silent, all conversations stopping as attention focused on our end. Patricia's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "I only prepared portions for family members," she said, her voice honey-sweet but venomous. "The caterers charge per person, and we ordered for invited family. I'm sure Sarah appreciates something lighter." The silence following her words was deafening. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for my reaction. Beside me, Ryan continued eating, his attention fixed on his plate. "Am I family or not?" I asked him quietly. Ryan looked up, his expression pained. "Please don't do this here," he mumbled around a bite of turkey. That's when something inside me shattered. 2 years of subtle humiliations and pretending not to notice crashed over me at once. I had endured Patricia's passive-aggressive treatment for Ryan's sake, believing she would eventually accept me. But sitting there with a side salad while everyone else enjoyed a feast, I realized nothing would change unless I made it change. When dessert was served, individual pumpkin crème brûlée with spiced whipped cream, I once again received nothing. Not even a dinner mint, just emptiness where my dessert should have been. I watched everyone savor their crème brûlée, making satisfied sounds and complimenting Patricia on the meal selection. Ryan was so focused on his dessert he didn't offer to share, didn't even notice I was sitting beside him with nothing. My hands trembled in my lap as I summoned courage. Rose sensed my determination and squeezed my hand under the table. Silent support that gave me the final push I needed. I had spent 2 years trying to fit into a family that never intended to make room for me. 2 years of diminishing myself, accepting disrespect, and pretending not to notice countless small cruelties. As I looked around at family members enjoying their meal while I sat excluded, I knew this moment would define our future. I could remain silent and accept permanent outsider status, or I could stand up for myself, whatever the consequences. I chose to stand up. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart, "I need to address something." Conversations around the table gradually quieted as people realized I was speaking. Ryan tensed beside me, his spoon frozen over his dessert. "Sarah," he whispered urgently, "not now." But I continued, my gaze fixed on Patricia at the head of the table. "For 2 years, I've tried to become part of this family. I've overlooked slights, ignored deliberate exclusions, and accepted being treated as less than. But tonight has clarified something I can no longer ignore." Patricia's smile remained though. Her knuckles went white around her wine glass. "I'm not sure what you're implying, dear. This hardly seems appropriate for Thanksgiving dinner." "Implying?" I repeated, maintaining composure. "Let me be explicit. Tonight, I was the only one without a place card. I was the only one staff ignored when serving cocktails. I received a side salad while everyone else enjoyed turkey and all the fixings. And now, no dessert." I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others appeared genuinely surprised, as if they hadn't noticed the pattern until I pointed it out. "But this isn't just about tonight," I continued. "It's about holiday gift exchanges where everyone receives presents except me because I'm not on the family list. It's about family photos where I'm asked to step aside so you can take just family pictures. It's about my wedding portrait being the only one missing from your family gallery." Charles frowned, looking genuinely confused. "Patricia, is this accurate?" Before Patricia could answer, Rose spoke up. "Every word is true, Charles. I've witnessed it repeatedly. This is absurd, Patricia said, her voice rising slightly. Sarah has always been overly sensitive. We've done nothing but welcome her. Welcome me? I repeated incredulously. You've systematically excluded me from day one. You compare me unfavorably to Amanda at every opportunity. You forget to include me in family events. You dismiss my profession, my background, everything about me. Ryan finally found his voice. Sarah, you're embarrassing yourself and my family. This is Dad's anniversary dinner. His words stung more than anything Patricia had ever done. Your family, I repeated. After 2 years of marriage, in your mind, am I still not part of your family? That's not what I meant, Ryan backpedaled, looking around at his relatives' uncomfortable faces. Isn't it? I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. Last month, you and your mother exchanged texts about me. Would you like me to read them aloud? Ryan's face went pale. You went through my phone. I didn't need to. You left it open on the bathroom counter while you showered. A notification from your mother caught my attention. I took screenshots. Your mother wrote, and I quote, Sarah looked so out of place at the Bar Association dinner. Can't you help her dress more appropriately for these functions? Amanda always understood the importance of proper presentation. And you replied, I know, Mom. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever truly fit into our world. Gasps and murmurs spread around the table. Jennifer stared at her plate. Thomas and Caroline exchanged glances. You've never once defended me, I said to Ryan, my voice finally breaking with emotion. Not once in 2 years have you stood up for me when your mother belittled me. How dare you, Patricia hissed, abandoning all pretense of civility. Ryan gave you access to a world you could never reach on your own, a nobody from some Midwest factory town. And this is your gratitude. Patricia, Charles exclaimed, shocked by her naked hostility. That's enough. No, Charles, it's not enough, Patricia continued, her carefully constructed image crumbling. She was never good enough for our son, and everyone at this table knows it. I'm just the only one with the courage to say it. Ryan looked stricken, his eyes moving between his mother and me. Mom, please stop. Choose Ryan, Patricia demanded. Right now, your family or her? The silence following her ultimatum was absolute. 22 pairs of eyes bore into Ryan, awaiting his answer. I held my breath, a part of me still hoping, despite all evidence, that he would finally choose me. Ryan swallowed hard, looked at his mother, then at me, then down at his half-eaten dessert. His silence was answer enough. I slowly stood, placing my napkin beside my empty plate. Thank you for making everything perfectly clear, both of you. I wouldn't remain where I wasn't wanted or respected. Dignity was all I had left, and I held on to it as I walked out of the dining room. No one called after me, no one followed, not even Ryan. In the foyer, I retrieved my coat from the confused valet and stepped out into the cold November night. Tears threatened, but I refused to shed them on Patricia's property. I reached my car before hearing footsteps behind me. Sarah, wait! It was Rose, not Ryan. You need to leave, I said, fumbling with my keys. I know, sweetheart, but you shouldn't drive upset. Let me follow you home. I can manage, I insisted, though my hands were shaking. Then I'll drive behind you to make sure you get there safely, Rose said firmly. And Sarah, I'm proud of you. What you did in there took tremendous courage. As I drove away from the mansion, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Rose's headlights remained steady behind me, but there was no sign of Ryan in the driveway. No indication that my husband had chosen to follow his wife instead of staying with his mother. That told me everything I needed to know. I arrived at our townhouse with Rose close behind. The doorman greeted me with his usual friendly smile, unaware that my world had just collapsed. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Do you want me to come up? Rose asked gently. I shook my head. I need some time alone, but thank you for being there tonight. Call me anytime, day or night, she insisted, hugging me tightly before the elevator doors opened to my floor. Inside our home, the silence was oppressive. Photos of Ryan and me from happier times seemed to mock me from the walls. Our wedding portrait, the one Patricia never displayed, held place of honor above our fireplace. We looked so happy, so hopeful. That couple now seemed like strangers. Only when the door was locked behind me did I allow the tears to fall. I collapsed onto the sofa and wept until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. All the pain, humiliation, and betrayal poured out in waves that left me gasping for breath. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Ryan, but I let them go to voicemail. When I finally listened to his messages, there were no apologies. Only anger. How could you humiliate my family like that on such an important night? Dad's anniversary dinner. Sarah, you need to call my mother and apologize immediately. The injustice of his demand brought fresh tears. In what universe was I the one who owed an apology? Around midnight, I heard Ryan's key in the lock. By then I had moved to the bedroom, sitting on the bed with a half-packed suitcase beside me. "What are you doing?" he asked, seeing the luggage. "Packing," I said simply. "I'm staying with Rose for a while." "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed. "Running away won't solve anything." "I'm not running away. I'm removing myself from a situation where I'm not respected or valued." Ryan paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "You embarrassed my mother in front of our entire extended family and half the legal community. What did you expect to happen?" "What did I expect?" I repeated in disbelief. "I expected my husband to defend me when his mother deliberately excluded and humiliated me. I expected basic human dignity at a family dinner. Mom is particular about her events, you know that." "Particular?" I laughed bitterly. "Ryan, she served me a side salad while everyone else had Thanksgiving dinner. She didn't give me dessert. How can you defend that?" "You're exaggerating like always," he dismissed. "If you had just talked to me privately afterward, instead of causing a scene. Like all the other times I privately discussed your mother's behavior. Did that ever change anything?" Ryan sat heavily on the bed's edge. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Dad's succession planning, the firm's reputation. Mom has always managed things a certain way." "A certain way that deliberately excludes and humiliates your wife?" I said coldly. "She's struggling with family changes. If you would just try harder to adapt." Something in me went cold at those words. Try harder? I've done nothing but try for 2 years. I've changed how I dress, how I speak, what I discuss. I've attended every family function, joined committees, donated to charities I couldn't afford. What more could I possibly do? "You could start by apologizing to my mother." I zipped my suitcase with finality. "I will not apologize for finally standing up for myself." As I moved toward the door, Ryan blocked my path. "If you leave now, you're choosing this conflict over our marriage." "No, Ryan. You made that choice already. When you sat silent while your mother treated me like trash. When you texted her agreeing that I don't fit in. When you demanded I apologize instead of acknowledging how deeply I've been hurt." I pushed past him with my suitcase, but his next words stopped me cold. "Mom warned me, you know. She said you'd never really adapt to our lifestyle, that eventually your true nature would show." I turned to face him one final time. "And she warned me too, in her way. She told me at our engagement party that your relationship with Amanda ended because she wasn't supportive enough of your career ambitions. But that was a lie, wasn't it? It ended because she finally got tired of how your mother treated her, and you not standing up for her." Derek's shocked expression confirmed my suspicion. "How did you know that?" "I didn't until right now, but it makes sense. Has your mother been in contact with Amanda recently, Ryan? Perhaps invited her to lunch?" His silence was damning evidence. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "Goodbye, Ryan." I spent that night on Rose's guest room sofa, alternating between tears and numbness. The next morning, Rose made coffee and sat beside me. "What happens now?" she asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wanted to fight for my marriage, but a larger part wondered if there was anything left worth fighting for. The following week passed in a haze. Ryan called and texted constantly, alternating between demands that I come home and apologies that never quite acknowledged the real problem. I maintained minimal contact, telling him I needed space to think. Then came unexpected allies. Thomas called me privately, something he had never done before. "Sarah, I want you to know that Caroline and I support you," he said awkwardly. What happened at that dinner was wrong. Mom has always been controlling, but this crossed every line. Later that day, Caroline texted me. "When I first married Thomas, Patricia treated me similarly, not as extremely, but the same pattern. It took years and me joining the firm before she accepted me. Just wanted you to know you're not alone or crazy. What she did was cruel." Even more surprising was Jennifer appearing at Rose's apartment unannounced. I should have said something that night, she admitted, looking genuinely ashamed. I've watched Mom treat you poorly for 2 years and stayed silent. I was afraid of becoming her next target. Has she always been like this? I asked. Jennifer nodded. With anyone she sees as a threat to her control of the family, yes. Dad has enabled it for decades. Thomas and I learned to cope. Ryan was always Mom's golden child, so he never had to. The most difficult conversation came when Charles called me directly. Sarah, this is Charles, he said formally. I want to apologize for what happened in our home. I had no idea the extent. Well, I should have been more observant, more involved. Thank you, I said, surprised by his call. Patricia and I are addressing this situation, he continued. I want you to know that I consider you family, regardless of how poorly that has been demonstrated. While these unexpected shows of support helped, Ryan's behavior grew increasingly concerning. He seemed to oscillate between remorse and anger, never fully acknowledging the core problem. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, he delivered his own ultimatum. Either you come home and make peace with my mother, or we need to reconsider our marriage. That same day, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Patricia Harrison, claiming I had borrowed and failed to return certain jewelry items from her home. It was a blatant lie and clear intimidation tactic. That evening, I called my best friend Lisa, a fellow therapist. She listened to the entire story without interruption. Sarah, what you're describing is a toxic family system, she said finally. Ryan is enmeshed with his mother. He may love you, but he's been conditioned his entire life to prioritize her approval above everything else. So what do I do? First, document everything. Every text, email, legal letter. And second, I think you should consult a divorce attorney, even if just to understand your options. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything that had happened, I had never allowed myself to think that far ahead. But Lisa was right. I needed to protect myself. 2 days later, I had a consultation with a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She reviewed my situation and helped me understand what a separation or divorce might entail. I made no decisions, but knowledge was power. That evening, my phone rang with Ryan's number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but decided to answer. Can we meet? He asked, his voice subdued. Just to talk, somewhere neutral. After some hesitation, I agreed. A coffee shop near Rose's apartment tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll be there, he promised. I hung up, wondering if this meeting would bring closure or a new beginning. Either way, I was no longer the woman who had sat silent, accepting disrespect at Patricia's table. That Sarah was gone forever. The coffee shop was busy with Saturday morning customers when I arrived 5 minutes early for my meeting with Ryan. I chose a corner table, partially shielded by a large plant, providing some privacy without complete isolation. My hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of black coffee I had barely touched. My stomach was too knotted with anxiety to handle caffeine. When Ryan entered, I barely recognized him. In just 3 weeks, he seemed to have aged years. His usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, hair not perfectly styled, dark circles evident under his eyes. He spotted me immediately and approached, carrying his coffee. Thank you for meeting me, he said formally, as if we were colleagues rather than spouses. You wanted to talk, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. So talk. Ryan took a deep breath, seemingly gathering his thoughts. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks, and I realize I owe you an apology. The way things happened at that dinner was wrong. I raised an eyebrow. Wrong? Is that really the word you want to use for what happened? He shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, I'm trying here. Are you? Because it sounds like you're minimizing what happened. Your mother deliberately excluded and humiliated me, and you let her do it. Then you demanded I apologize to her. I know, he said, his voice dropping. I know how that sounds now. At the time, I was just reacting the way I always do. Mom gets upset. We all rush to smooth things over, even when she's completely in the wrong. Especially when she's wrong, he admitted quietly. It's always been easier to appease her than confront her. I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. I brought something I want you to see. What is this? Evidence, I said simply. Open it. Inside were printouts of text exchanges, emails, photographic documentation of 2 years of systematic exclusion and undermining by Patricia, all arranged chronologically with dates and brief explanations. Ryan flipped through each page slowly, his expression growing more troubled with each page. "You kept all of this?" "Not intentionally at first, but after a while. I started documenting things because you always dismissed my concerns. I needed proof for myself that I wasn't imagining it." He paused at a screenshot of his text exchange with Patricia about me not fitting in. "I remember this. That night I was so frustrated, angry that things were always tense between you and Mom. I shouldn't have said that." "No, you shouldn't have," I agreed. "But what hurt me more is that you've never once defended me. Not once in all of this." The waitress came to our table to refill our coffee. "Everything okay?" she asked, probably sensing the tension. "We're fine, thank you," Ryan replied automatically. After she left, he leaned forward. "Sarah, I want to tell you about something that happened after you left that dinner." I braced myself. "Go ahead." "After you walked out, there was this terrible silence. Then Aunt Margaret started saying you were overreacting, and Mom started crying about how disrespectful you had been." "But Dad?" Dad stood up and said, "Enough, Patricia. What you did tonight was cruel and deliberate, and I won't pretend otherwise." I blinked in surprise. Charles had always been so passive about Patricia's behavior. He told everyone at the table that he had watched Mom control who gets included and who gets pushed out of the family for years, and that he had been a coward for allowing it. He said he was ashamed of her behavior and mine too. "Yours?" Ryan nodded. Then Dad pulled me aside and said something I can't stop thinking about. He said, "I failed to protect you children from your mother's worst impulses, and now you're failing to protect your wife. Don't make my mistake, son. It leads to a half-lived life." I sat back, processing this information. "What did you say?" "Nothing at first. I was still defending Mom out of habit. But then Dad showed me something." Ryan pulled out his phone and scrolled to find a photo. "Here," he handed me the phone. On the screen was a photo I had never seen before. Charles and a young woman at what looked like a law school formal. "That's Dad and Rose," Ryan explained. They dated seriously in law school. Dad was going to propose, but his family disapproved. Rose was from a working-class family in East Texas, worked her way through UT. Sound familiar? What happened? His family pressured him to break up and introduced him to Mom, who came from the right Dallas society family. Dad chose the easier path. He told me he's regretted it his entire life. I handed back the phone, unsure what to say. "The thing is," Ryan continued, "I saw myself making the same mistake, and the thought of a lifetime of regret terrified me." "So what are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying I was wrong about everything. The way I let Mom treat you, the way I failed to stand up for you, the way I prioritized keeping peace over protecting the person I love most in the world." For the first time in our conversation, I felt a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. "Words are easy, Ryan. What about actions? That's why I'm here. I want us to go to marriage counseling. I want to learn how to be the husband you deserve. And I've told Mom that our relationship can't continue as it was." How did she take that? "Not well," he admitted with a rueful smile. There were tears, accusations, threats to disinherit me. But I held firm. I told her that if she wants me in her life, she has to respect you and our marriage. And if she can't do that, we'll have limited contact with her. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. These weeks apart have been the worst of my life." I wanted to believe him, but there was still something bothering me. "What about Amanda?" Ryan looked genuinely confused. "What about Amanda?" "Your mother has been meeting with her. Have you been in contact with her too?" "No," he said firmly. "I had no idea Mom was meeting with her until you mentioned it that night. I called Amanda afterward to ask about it. Turns out Mom had been trying to orchestrate chance encounters between us for months. Amanda only went along with it because Mom told her our marriage was struggling." "And that was the first time you'd spoken to her since we've been together?" "Yes," he insisted. "Amanda and I didn't work out for good reasons, and we both moved on. She actually told me to fight for our marriage because she'd never seen me as happy as I was with you." The waitress returned, this time with a concerned expression. "Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing a little. My mother-in-law was similar. She put 2 pieces of pecan pie on our table, on the house. Sometimes sweet things help with difficult conversations. After she left, both Ryan and I managed small smiles, breaking some of the tension. "I'm not saying one conversation will fix everything," Ryan said. "I know I have a lot to prove to you, but I'm asking for a chance to do that. Will you come to counseling with me? I've already found someone who specializes in family dynamics." I considered his request carefully. Despite everything that had happened, I still loved him, and for the first time, he seemed to truly understand the problem and be willing to address it. "One session," I agreed cautiously. "We can start with that." The relief on his face was evident. "Thank you." 2 days later, we sat in Dr. Martinez's office, a space decorated warmly with southwestern art and comfortable leather chairs. After introductions, she asked us to explain what brought us there. I let Ryan go first, wanting to hear how he would frame the situation. Surprisingly, he was brutally honest about his mother's behavior, his enabling of it, and his failure to support me. "I grew up believing that keeping Mom happy was everyone's job," he explained. "It was easier to go along with her demands than deal with the emotional fallout of challenging her." I never realized how destructive that pattern was until I saw it through Sarah's eyes, and even then I resisted acknowledging it. Dr. Martinez nodded. "That's very common in families with controlling members. The entire system reorganizes to accommodate the controlling person's needs." When my turn came, I described my experience of being systematically excluded, the constant message that I wasn't really part of the family. "What I struggle with most," I admitted, "is wondering if Ryan and I can move forward when his mother remains such a destructive force in our lives." "That's a valid concern," Dr. Martinez acknowledged. "Ryan, are you willing to establish and maintain boundaries with your mother to protect your marriage?" "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "I've already started." We spent the rest of the session discussing specific boundaries and communication strategies. By the end, I felt cautiously hopeful. Ryan seemed genuinely committed to change, and having a neutral third party validate my experiences felt incredibly validating. A week later, Ryan suggested a meeting with his parents at Charles's law office, neutral territory away from Patricia's domain. I agreed, though anxiety still churned in my stomach, as we rode the elevator to the top floor of the downtown high-rise. Charles greeted us in his corner office, looking distinguished but with an unfamiliar warmth in his demeanor. "Thank you both for coming," he said, gesturing to chairs arranged around his conference table, where Patricia was waiting. She sat rigidly, impeccably dressed as always, but with obvious tension in her posture. She didn't stand when we entered. "Patricia," Charles said firmly, "we discussed how this meeting would proceed." With clear reluctance, she stood and offered her hand to me. "Sarah, thank you for coming." The next hour was one of the most difficult of my life. Ryan laid out clearly the changes needed for us to maintain a relationship with his parents, particularly Patricia. These included treating me with respect at all times, acknowledging me as a full family member, and ceasing all attempts to undermine our marriage. "If these boundaries aren't respected," Ryan concluded, "we'll limit contact." "That's not a threat, Mom. It's simply what needs to happen for my marriage to thrive." Patricia's face went through multiple emotions: disbelief, anger, hurt, calculation. Finally, she settled on controlled composure. "I believe my actions have been misunderstood," she began. "Mom," Ryan interrupted. "We're not here to debate whether your behavior was hurtful. It was. The question is whether you can change it going forward." Charles placed his hand over Patricia's. "We've discussed this extensively, Patricia. It's time to choose what kind of relationship you want with our son and daughter-in-law." The term daughter-in-law hung in the air, a reminder of my legitimate place in the family that Patricia had worked so hard to deny. After a long silence, Patricia spoke. "I'd like to suggest family counseling. If there are communication issues, perhaps a professional can help us understand each other better." It wasn't an apology, but it was a concession, a willingness to engage in a process that could lead to change. For Patricia, it was a significant step. Ryan looked at me, leaving the decision in my hands. I thought about everything we had been through, the pain and betrayal, but also the possibility of healing. "I think that could be helpful," I said finally, "if everyone commits to the process genuinely." As we left the meeting, Ryan took my hand. "Thank you for giving us this chance. I know it wasn't easy." "This is just a beginning," I cautioned. "I know," he agreed. but it's a beginning I didn't think was possible 3 weeks ago. Walking out into the bright Texas afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not certainty, not complete trust, but hope. For now, that was enough. 6 months passed, bringing changes I couldn't have imagined on that devastating Thanksgiving night when I sat at Patricia's table with an empty plate. Spring had arrived in Dallas, bluebonnets blooming across the state, seeming to mirror the transformation in our family relationships. Ryan had grown in ways that continued to surprise and move me. The man who once sat silent while his mother excluded me now stood firm as my advocate. In our weekly sessions with Dr. Martinez, he had examined his childhood patterns, understanding how they had shaped his responses to conflict, especially with his mother. I was trained from birth to keep Mom happy at any cost, he explained in one session. Any disruption to her vision of how things should be led to emotional consequences for everyone. I learned to anticipate her needs, smooth over problems before they reached her, and never ever challenge her directly. Dr. Martinez had helped him see how these survival mechanisms, though necessary as a child, were damaging in his adult relationships. Your primary loyalty now belongs to your marriage, she reminded him. That requires a fundamental shift in your priorities. To his credit, Ryan had thrown himself wholeheartedly into this difficult work. He had established clear boundaries with Patricia, maintained them consistently, and supported me when family tensions arose, as they inevitably did. The family therapy sessions that Charles had suggested actually happened, though not without resistance from Patricia. Under Dr. Coleman's guidance, a therapist specializing in family systems, we began the messy, uncomfortable process of addressing decades of dysfunction. Patricia, Dr. Coleman said in our third session, your behavior suggests a deep fear of losing control. You try to manage family relationships because you're afraid of being displaced from your central role. Patricia was visibly uncomfortable. That's ridiculous. I simply maintain certain standards for our family. Standards that conveniently exclude anyone you perceive as a threat to your influence, Charles observed, with a gentleness that softened the criticism. Over time, these difficult conversations began to yield insights. Patricia reluctantly revealed aspects of her own upbringing, her mother's conditional love, her father's emotional unavailability, and the pressure she felt to maintain a perfect image at any cost. I was taught that appearance is everything, she admitted in our 6th session, that people would only respect me if I represented something they aspired to. This didn't excuse her behavior toward me, but it helped me understand its origins. The woman who once seemed like an implacable enemy began to appear more human, wounded by her own past in ways that had affected everyone around her. Our personal life flourished alongside these therapeutic interventions. Ryan and I had moved back to our townhouse, rebuilding our relationship day by day. We established new traditions, including hosting our own holiday gatherings, where everyone was genuinely welcomed. These events became a healing space for the extended family. Thomas and Carolyn, freed from constantly seeking Patricia's approval, shared more openly about their own experiences. Jennifer, who had always competed for her mother's attention, relaxed into more authentic relationships with everyone, including me. Most surprisingly, Charles emerged from decades of passive enabling to become a more active participant in family life. He began calling Ryan regularly, not just about legal matters, but to check on our well-being. He took me to lunch occasionally, asking thoughtful questions about my practice and sharing stories about his own early career challenges. I regret many things, he told me at one such lunch, but mostly I regret not having the courage to challenge dynamics that hurt people I cared about. I can't reclaim those years, but I can do better now. Rose remained my steadfast ally throughout the journey. I'm so proud of you, she often said. Standing up for yourself changed not just your marriage, but this entire family system. The clearest evidence of our progress came 4 months after that devastating Thanksgiving, when Patricia invited us to Easter dinner at their home. I entered the house with trepidation, memories of previous humiliations still fresh, despite all our therapeutic work. But this time, something was different. Patricia greeted me with a stiff but genuine hello. The dining table included a proper place setting for me, and our wedding photo had appeared among the family portraits in the hallway. I consulted with the caterers about the menu, Patricia said awkwardly as we sat down to dinner. There's herb-crusted lamb instead of ham if you prefer. It was a small but significant gesture from a woman who had once served me nothing but a side salad while everyone else enjoyed a feast. "Thank you," I said simply. "The lamb sounds wonderful." However, the most profound change in our lives came unexpectedly, in the form of 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Ryan and I had discussed having children eventually, but the timing caught both of us by surprise. When we shared the news with his parents, Patricia's reaction showed both how far we had come and how far we still had to go. "A grandchild?" she said, her expression a complex mix of genuine joy and her old controlling instincts. "I should convert the guest room into a nursery for when you visit." Ryan looked at me across the table, reading my discomfort. "Mom, we appreciate the thought, but let's take things one step at a time. We'll discuss visiting arrangements that work for everyone as the pregnancy progresses." Patricia's smile tightened, but she nodded. "Of course, I'm just excited." Later, privately, Ryan reassured me. "Our child will never experience what you went through. We'll make sure of that." I believed him. The man who once couldn't stand up to his mother was now committed to protecting both me and our unborn child from toxic family dynamics. As my pregnancy progressed, I often reflected on the lessons of the past year. Standing up for myself that night at Patricia's table had been terrifying but necessary. It had precipitated a crisis that ultimately led to healing that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. I had learned that maintaining dignity sometimes requires risking relationships, that true love includes respect and protection, that families can change when brave individuals refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns. Most importantly, I had learned that building family isn't just about blood relations or marriage licenses. It's about constructing relationships based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Today, our family photo includes not just Ryan and me, but Rose, Charles, Thomas, and Carolyn, Jennifer and her husband, and yes, even Patricia. It's not a perfect family, not without ongoing challenges and work, but it's one where everyone is acknowledged, included, and valued. As I look toward the future, preparing to welcome our child into this imperfect but evolving family, I feel grateful for the painful journey that brought us here. The empty plate that once symbolized my exclusion led to a fuller life than I could have imagined. If you've ever faced similar struggles with in-laws or family dynamics that made you feel excluded, remember that you deserve respect and inclusion. Standing up for yourself can be frightening, but staying silent only ensures nothing will change. Your voice matters. Your place at the dinner table matters. Have you ever experienced challenges with relatives or family members that made you feel excluded? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve a seat at the table. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, building healthy family relationships is always worth the difficult work it requires.